You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Growing up in an anti-religious environment, then going into the New Age movement, and then finally becoming Catholic? Who is this woman? Welcome everyone to Polycarp's Paradigm. I'm with Christine Mooney-Flynn, the founder and creator of the Catholic Mama podcast and lovely wife of my friend Pat Flynn. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Eric.
Yes, well, if you wouldn't mind just kind of giving a brief introduction and where people could find you as well online, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I can be found at the Catholic Mama, M-A-M-A for Mama, thecatholicmama.com, and I have a podcast called The Catholic Mama that you can find on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, all the usual spots, which I started really probably within a couple months of converting to Catholicism about 2 years ago.
Wow.
So here I am. I love it. I've probably, I've asked every time I tell my mom, like, hey, I'm doing a podcast. Are you making money off of it? Like, no.
No.
This is a passion project. I love everything about the faith, and I am so excited after so many years of questions and uncertainty to get to share it with other people. And I figured if I had questions, especially my kids, our oldest was old enough to know the difference between going to church and not going to church. And kids are natural philosophers and a lot of questions. So I thought that maybe if I did a podcast and blogged a little bit, help parents to better explain, because I would go to Bible studies and women's Bible studies, and the women there would be like, man, my kid asked me this question. I had no idea how to answer it. I felt like I said something stupid. I was like, I think I can help with that.
Yes. What's like one of your favorite podcast episodes that you've done? I'm just curious.
I really, really like personally, and their writing, Carrie Gress and Emily Stimson Chapman. And I've had both of them on, and especially Carrie talking about just the lies of feminism. I think was a really cool podcast. Wow. and based on her book, The Anti-Mary Exposed. I really like talking to her. And Emily Stimson Chapman, she combines cooking, and which is a passion of mine, and then also just her path out of an eating disorder through the Eucharist was really interesting to me.
Whoa.
Yeah, so those are good episodes.
Check those out for sure. And how many kids do you have these days?
4, 6, wow. 4, 2, and almost 6 months. And we homeschool. So awesome. I should say, yeah, we homeschool, and it's busy and full. Very nice.
That's awesome. Well, I'm so excited to get into your story, and man, just briefly talking to you right before this, just what a interesting story you have. So take us back to the beginning, wherever you want to start on your journey, and kind of how you grew up and what that environment was like. And
Sure. Yeah. So I was born in New York, and my whole family's from New York, but we moved to North Carolina by the time I was 6 years old. And so I grew up in the Bible Belt with 2 parents who were fallen away Catholics. So really stuck out like a sore thumb, not only because there were very few Catholics, although my best friend growing up happened to be Catholic. So I would occasionally get dragged along to Mass with her if I spent the night on a Saturday. But really stuck out because one, from New York in the South, which it was not very common. Now it is, but it was definitely not common 30 years ago. And and then having parents that didn't go to church. It was like the 3 questions we get asked when we first moved to the South was, where are you from? What does your daddy do? And what church do you go to? I just always felt like I answered those questions incorrectly.
You're like, oh man, don't ask me.
We don't go to church, and I'm from the North. It's just not. It was a little hostile back then. Now it's different. I mean, there's been so many Northerners or outsiders coming into, especially to where I grew up, was in Raleigh, North Carolina, which Duke and Chapel Hill and NC State and the Research Triangle Park, banking, biomedical stuff. So it's definitely opened up, and it's not I don't want to say backwoods, but it's not that closed in like it used to feel. Which actually, looking back, I'm nostalgic about it. I wish it was. They used to be closed on Sunday. Everything was closed on Sundays, which my family and I would complain about as being non-Christians, but looking back, it would be nice if it was still like that.
Wow. And how many siblings did you have?
Just one. I have one older brother who he's not a believer either.
Okay.
And I think, I know the statistics that if the father isn't really a practicing faith-filled person, then the children probably won't be.
Okay.
And that is definitely the case, because my mom is very spiritual but not religious. I'm, slowly. She prayed a rosary not too long ago, so I'm slowly getting her back. But there's a lot of other things. I mean, there's decades of misinformation and wrong beliefs to try to get through. So,
how did she get into the being spiritual but not religious after being a fallen away Catholic? Was she kind of always like that, even after she be?
My mom, I don't know. My mom is one of 5 girls, and I think in their house you had to go to church every Sunday. You had to participate until you were confirmed, and then it was up to you. And at that point, she just she would go. And I think by the time my dad, very, very strict Catholic household, but I think that he's one of 10, and they all left the church, all 10 of them. So. Wow. Yeah, I have a feeling that maybe, especially my dad is older, he's in his 70s, and he's the 3rd youngest out of the 10. So if my oldest aunt was still alive, or is she still alive? I don't know, I think she's in her 90s. So an older family, and I would imagine when my dad was growing up, maybe it was more of rote memorization and just believe, don't ask questions, just believe. And so I think when he felt like he could think for himself, he left, and so did all the siblings. So, but my mom, my aunt, I think is one of my mom's best friends, and she got into that stuff. And so just chit chats on the old phone, corded phone back in the day, and sending books back and forth got her into New Age.
Okay. And then when did you kind of start picking up that spirituality? Like, was it pretty young or?
Yeah, actually, I remember a time where I really believed in God. And we used to have these woods in the back of our house, and there were paths through the woods, and my friends and I made like the layout of a house, and we made sure that there was a church there. And this is a friend who was Catholic, so I think we always talked about Mary when we were in that little space of the woods. And I remember saying, I watched the Song of Bernadette, that old black and white movie, and told my mom I wanted to be a nun one day, and she laughed and said, "No, you don't." And I just went, "Oh, okay." Just left it at that. And then, it's funny. My mom, we lived in Southern California for about 4 years when I was a kid. Okay. And she started doing yoga there. And I think that's probably when the first kind of new agey books started creeping into the house. Okay. And, as a kid, I would just pick up whatever book was around and flip through it. And I don't know, I started having, that's another thing, dream interpretation was really big for me. And I had a lot of active dreams. And a lot of them seemed to come true. And so I thought that I was privy to certain information that the universe was giving me. And, I think I got my first dream interpretation book as a gift one year, probably when I was 12 or 13, and just really, really dove into it. Just totally believed that I was getting special privileged information from the universe, the spirit world, or whatever. Wow. And really spent a lot of time on dream interpretation and meditation, trying to understand the dreams and get more information. I mean, I would be so excited to go to bed at night. Probably the only kid who's excited. It's like, oh, what am I going to dream tonight? And it didn't always come true, but there were some like, man, that seems really specific.
So, and one of your best friends was Catholic, and then you also had other friends that were Baptist in North Carolina.
Oh yeah, Baptist, Mormon, evangelical, a whole mix of.
Yeah, like how did they react when you started maybe sharing with them like about your dreams or about like your spirituality that was developed?
Yeah, my best friend was not happy. She was scared about it. She didn't want me talking about it. And at the time I was like, you're just not in the know, you don't understand what's happening to me. And she's like, I don't like it. She just flat out told me, no, don't talk about it. It scares me. Wow. And I thought she was just being silly. But then I had other friends who were also new agey. So a friend of mine, very well-meaning girl, but not a lot of parental oversight. So we would go over and play with the Ouija board in her room. And I was probably maybe 7th or 8th grade. And we were playing with the Ouija board, and everything that came through that Ouija board actually came true. And at the time, I mean, years later, that stuff all came true. But at the time, we thought we were getting really specific information, and we asked, how many spirits are in the room with us? And now I look back and realize how naive we were, because we were so excited when it said 7 spirits in the room. Well, wow, neither of us figured to ask, are you nice spirits? Like,
Right.
are you angels or are you demons?
Right.
Of course, that wouldn't have even played into our thoughts. So it just playing with a lot of dangerous stuff very early on.
Did you ever feel like, as you kind of progressed down this path, like any sort of demonic presence, or were you just like, no, this is all good stuff? I mean,
the only time, and I was actually just thinking about this morning, is I had this one dream, and there was certain music playing in the dream that I really remember, and it was not a nice dream. Whatever it was just was not nice. But there was this very haunting music, and I still remember it. I could never like verbalize or replay it or anything like that. But then one night I heard it's just like so weird this happened. But I was in bed. I was probably in my teens at this point, late teens. And I heard a door creak open, and I heard that music play. And I freaked out, and I hid under the covers until it stopped. And then the door shut. I heard the door slam shut. Wow. And I've never heard the music again. But I was thinking about that recently. I was like, man, what if I hadn't hid under the covers? Like, what was waiting for me out there if I had let it in? And I'm very glad that I didn't. I didn't have it. I wasn't baptized, so I didn't have a guardian angel, but somebody was helping me out there.
Man, so you were pretty into the New Age in your teenage years, and then what happened maybe when you went into college? Did you continue that, or like what were some other practices that you kind of developed? Like you mentioned dream interpretation, meditation. Was there anything else like yoga or?
Yeah. I mean, I did yoga. I occasionally, but the thing is, I was so arrogant and really narcissistic about the information that I was receiving, that everybody's on their own journey. We're all on a path to enlightenment or something. I don't know if I really had a coherent idea of what was going to happen in the end for all of us. I was big in reincarnation.
Okay.
But I was very arrogant that you and I could be on the same like new agey spiritual journey, but I was ahead of you. No matter what you said, I was still further along in my journey. And so I got accused a lot of being holier than thou, which I would have outwardly said, no, I'm not. I know. No, I'm not. But then inwardly I said, well, if anybody should be holier than thou, have that attitude, it would be me, because I'm right. So just total arrogance about all of it. So I became more and more convinced that even any mistakes that I made, even when I hurt somebody, that's part of their journey. I'm on mine. I learned my lesson. And if they're upset about what I did to them, well, that's them in their spiritual journey. They need to learn to let that go. And any mistakes I had could easily be brushed off as, well, that's just, I used to actively not believe in mistakes. As long as you learned a lesson from something, mistakes did not exist. Wow. So I could say mean things to somebody, and then maybe like we didn't talk ever again. Well, months down the line, I'd be like, oh, that was bad that I said that. Well, I learned my lesson. So it wasn't a mistake that I said the mean things to them, and we'll all just move on. I don't have to apologize or anything like that. So very icy, very willing just never look back. I would do like just all the burned bridges and like just the firestorm behind me. I just wouldn't just pretend that it wasn't there.
What did you do?
So I became more and more insulated and mean. And
but your friends still were your friends? Like they didn't give up on you?
I guess I was nice enough to enough people. When I was nice, I think. And then as soon as I didn't want to be with a boyfriend anymore, or if I had a falling out with a friend, it was done. I got to tell you, and I went back after I converted, in the early months after I converted, and tried to find some of the people that I knew that I had hurt and asked for forgiveness, or just, said, whatever. And a lot of them never got back, and I can't blame them.
Wow. What did you do? Like, I don't know if your friend mentioned, or if you heard on the news something like obviously evil, like a rape happened. Like, how would you filter that into your paradigm? Like, oh, but there's no evil. Like, it's just like everyone's journey. Like, how would you filter evil? Like,
it made no sense. So I believe that the universe was guided by, basically, it's like a Star Wars religion. I don't even know how else. It was just bad Star Wars spirituality. So there's a good and a light, a light and a dark side of the Force, and a constantly battling, very dualistic. But then clearly you want the good side to win. But then where's that ultimate good? There has to be some kind of objective good. But I didn't get that far. So, I mean, there'd be reincarnation. So if somebody did something really terrible that was part of their spiritual journey, and they would have to pay for that in some way, karma, and the next life they would have something cruel happen to them, or they would get more chances in other lives to learn from past mistakes and gradually with each life attain a higher and higher life force. But then if you were really bad, like say Hitler or a Stalin, then you would be frozen in a spirit state until you learned your lesson, like in a spiritual jail or something like that.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. Is that common with reincarnation belief?
I don't know. I know a few people and I've read a few books, so it's out there, but yeah.
This is a silly question, but like when you would see like a cockroach or a grasshopper or like a blade of grass even, I don't know, like would you be like, man, they must have really screwed up in their previous life? Like,
I did not believe that you would regress into an inanimate or a non-human form. So you would be just a different human.
Well, then did you look down on like the poor or like the people that were kind of down and out? Man, you must have messed up in your previous life. Like,
yeah, I don't think I think I was just very indifferent to them. That's part of their journey. I was disgusted by weakness of any kind. So,
wow.
If anybody expressed any kind of people who had addictions, anything like that, I would really struggle with being compassionate towards anybody. That's your journey. Who am I to say what you're on? That was a stupid thing for you to choose to become addicted to that substance or to be depressed over that, which it's just a very, very icy, mean way of thinking.
And did you ever get into like energy work, like with Reiki or energy portals and all those things?
I actually, I got invited. There was this one like crystal shop that I went into. It was not to buy. I was on my way to I actually did not believe in any of this stuff at this point, but I needed to buy pretty rocks for something.
Okay.
Some project I was doing, and I could not find them anywhere in person except for this little crystal shop. So I went in, and the woman started asking me a bunch of questions. I was actually with Pat. Pat got dragged into doing Reiki. They invited me, but I was like, well, I have a couple kids. I'm not going to leave the house at 8 o'clock at night to go do this of all things. So I sent Pat. But other than that, I've never done that. I did. I got my palm read a few times. I did something where you shake up rocks and sticks in your hand and throw them onto a table. But I was also very difficult with any of that stuff. Like I would go, if they were at the flea market and wanted $10 to read my fortune, I would do it. But I would put up this wall, be like, you know what? I'm way more advanced than you. You're not going to be able to read me. Go for it.
Wow.
Try your best. You're not going to get in. So I would always. It was just, again, more narcissism.
Yeah. So did this continue throughout college and stuff as well? Or like after high school?
Yep. Kept going for a long time. The thing that finally started me to start thinking that maybe this wasn't real and maybe I had just made up all of it was the dreams that I continued to have dreams that, would come true or seem to come true. You could retrofit anything. They stopped. I stopped having dreams entirely. Okay. And it felt like, for a while there, it just felt like somebody had the bath faucet, just filling up the tub, water gushing through, and then it just got turned off immediately. And I felt really betrayed by that because I felt like I was getting, I was in with the universe and I was getting information and then it stopped. I was like, well, I got abandoned. I really felt, I guess that's true. I felt abandoned.
Wow.
And so then I started thinking back, like, maybe I made all this up. And then my mom was still wanting to talk about this stuff a lot. And I would just nod when she would talk and I wouldn't say much back until I just finally stopped believing in anything. And it didn't help that, over time, as you age, you start to accumulate more tragedies, whether they're personal tragedies, like, things that happen to terrible things that happen to a family member or a friend, or global tragedies like 9/11 and tsunamis and earthquakes.
Mm-hmm.
And so all this stuff started building up in my mind. I don't have a good answer for any of this. It doesn't seem like the good and there's good and bad, and it doesn't feel like the good is very equal now to the bad. The bad seems like it's stronger, but that doesn't seem right. Like the bad can't be what's going to win out in the end. We all know innately, or we want to have the good be the thing that wins in the end. So I decided, well, maybe there isn't good and bad. Maybe there's no equal forces at all. Maybe there's just nothing. And maybe this is all just happenstance and we're just a random collection of atoms.
So you
and
became
at that point,
an atheist, like for
yeah,
sure.
and at that point that was with Pat, because I hadn't really even entertained the idea of being an atheist until Pat started just here and there. He would never really talk much about it, but I would talk about my experiences, and then I don't even know how we started talking. That's not something we really talked about when we were first together.
What an interesting. I would have loved to be a fly in the wall in y'all's conversations. Like, you're talking about all this New Age stuff, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm an atheist."
Yeah. I think he just kind of like, yeah, all right, maybe for you or whatever. I don't know. So I respect him very much. He's a very intelligent person, and here's this very intelligent person whom I respect and love telling me that there's nothing. I'm like, well, all right, there's nothing. So,
did you ever, like, because you had those Christian friends growing up, like, what did you do with the person of Jesus? Did you just visit? Did you view him as like a guru or ascended master, or like when they were like, no, he's the savior? Like, what did you do with the person of Jesus back then in your New Age stuff?
Well, it's hard because growing up in the Bible Belt, there was a level of being open with your faith that I just was severely uncomfortable with, and not all, I should say, a lot of the Christians that I was exposed to on a regular basis, we did not get along. So it was like kids in the neighborhood who would scream that we were going to hell, and it's just like. And then I remember actually the one thing that really turned me off towards Christianity in general was I was at a slumber party with a girl who her family was from Hong Kong, and me, and then two Southern Baptists. And the Baptist it was at one of the Baptist house, and they started talking about the rapture, and it was like this, telling ghost stories. And I feel so bad for the poor girl because she was about to fly back to Hong Kong the next week to visit family. And they're like, well, when the rapture comes, you could be in an airplane, like when you're going next week, and, half the people get taken up, just disappear, their clothes are left, and then you're a slave of Satan for 1,000 years. And the poor girl, she was crying. She was so scared. She wasn't sure she wanted to go visit her family in Hong Kong anymore. And then I started defending. What's funny is that through all this, if anybody was getting bullied, I could not stand it. I was always the anti-bully. And so I felt like she was getting bullied. And so I started yelling at them. And I was just, all I could think of was, if there is Jesus and there's God, I can't imagine that he'd want to scare this sweet little girl, this sweet 12-year-old girl, into thinking that she was going to go on an airplane and half of her, the people on the plane were going to disappear to heaven, and then she would just be stuck on earth because she wasn't a believer. So that just really turned me off to anything related to that. And I thought that as I got older, I didn't really understand, I'd get asked like, have you accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior? I'd hear the whole time, like, I don't know what that means, or probably not. I just figured that he was a middleman. Yeah. I thought that any organized religion was just, some people were just weak enough to need some direction by a church, and that's good for them. But I just need to get to the, worshiping the universe, or whatever. And I'm going to do it through, I'm not going to do it through Jesus Christ. I don't need that. I'm stronger than that.
Wow.
More advanced, he's just a guru, like just a middleman trying to get people to God. Well, that's good for some people. No thanks.
Wow. So you went into New Age, and from there you became an atheist for how many years would you say you were like an atheist?
But like committed and also mocking Christians and mocking believers at that point, probably 3 or 4 years, I think.
Wow.
Actually, maybe 5 years. It was a good chunk of the first. I guess as a confirmed atheist, probably 3 or 4 years, and then but it was several years prior to that where I felt like that abandonment, betrayal by spiritual stuff, and so I just started moving away from it and feeling more cynical.
Did you ever feel during those years, like, I don't know, just a sense of purposelessness or emptiness, or were you always just like, or you just didn't think about those things? You were just focused on your day to day, or what was kind of your thoughts in the?
No, I was still very aware and very acutely aware of that something was missing, or that I was called to something higher. I just didn't know what it was. My biggest fear throughout my teen years and early 20s, would have been mediocrity. I was really, really scared of just being a mediocre so-and-so. And so what I would do, because I didn't feel like I had, I didn't feel like I was very special, I guess, or worth much of anything. So I would either stay with somebody or be friends with somebody or stay at a job for just a little while. And then as soon as I felt like maybe they were getting to know me too much, I would just bounce. So by the time I was 25, I probably had about 30 jobs, and went through friends and boyfriends and just like cycled through, because I just didn't want anybody to see that maybe I wasn't as cool or adventurous or whatever that I felt like I should be, that I would have been called to something more important than what I was doing. So I always felt like there was some ultimate end that I should be achieving. I just had no idea what that was. And then always felt like my brother and I would joke around that it's the Darth Vader complex, like just this general darkness that's just chasing after us that we can't get away from. And now I know that it's just our original sin that we have to try to rectify and move past. But it's just constant searching and constant running away.
Wow. So what was like the first thing that kind of made you curious about God again? Or like maybe it was Pat, or I don't know what it was, but what was the first thing that was like, well, maybe I'm wrong about this atheist thing actually?
Yeah. It was several things at once, probably. I would say, once I realized that I was Christian and then Catholic, God made really quick work, and I converted and wholesale got rid of all my past beliefs and became a Catholic. And but before that, it's just a lot of small things over time. Something that's like probably pretty inconsequential, but now I look back now, it's actually important. I got tired of being cynical. So my mom and the kids, this was after a couple of my kids were born, my mom would send the kids decorations for 4th of July or something cute for Valentine's Day, and I was so tired of just like going, oh, another holiday, rolling my eyes at yet another thing we have to do that's meaningless. So I got tired of that. I wanted to have fun again. I wanted to be joyful, which I just wasn't. I just was not a joyful person. I'd also become a no person, and I know that drove Pat crazy. So I'm more introverted anyway, and I was working full time in an office. So I would come home after being bombarded by people all day, and I just wanted to hole up. And Pat is the opposite. He's an extrovert who needs to be around people, but he works from home. So I would come home, be like, hey, what's going on? Let's go out. Let's go see people. I'd be like, no. So I just became this, I would say no for everything. Hey, you want to go out? No. I need 3 days notice to get the energy to want to do this.
Wow.
And I was just tired of, I wasn't always like that. It just got worse over time. And so I got tired of being a no person and being cynical. And then on top of that, Pat we get a lot of books delivered from Amazon. And so suddenly it wasn't the typical books that he was reading. It started to become more new agey or spiritual books. Eastern religion stuff was showing up in the mail. And then more philosophy and Aristotle. And then of course, Aquinas after that. And when I saw that he was asking a lot of questions, and I got angry, I was very angry because I felt like, he brought me into atheism. He pulled me finally down to that pit of saying I didn't believe in God. And now he was climbing back out and leaving me there.
Wow.
And I was just angry. I was very, very angry at him for doing that. But it's still, that was a little fizzer in the hardness of my heart. But really the thing that changed everything was giving birth for the first time and becoming a mother.
Wow.
Because before that, I love it. It's ridiculous now that I'm a mother and I know different. But when I was pregnant with our first, we have a Saint Bernard, Lola, and I was like, well, I love my dog. I assume I will love my child in a very similar fashion. And I said it very matter of fact in my head. I was like, I will love my dog or my child like I love my dog. That's just how it will work. And lo and behold, man, in the delivery room, our son pops out, and I gotta tell you, there's like a flash of light. And the first thing that came to my mind is, "I will kill for you." That's when I saw my son. That like it was a flash of light, and those words came to my mind. Like,
Wow.
that's different than what I expected. And I just I fell in love with my son, and he's just so cute. And I came to this, it was just a moment of real confusion, because I love my son, and I was pouring hours, he didn't sleep for like 2 years. So it was 24/7. I was spending all that time with him and caring for him and reading him books and teaching him things and, giving him love. And to think that in 100 years we'd be dust, and nothing, was horrifying to me. How could that possibly be that I love my son this much, and yet it'll disappear and it'll be done. So I had real problems. I started being very nervous about my mortality, and started getting depressed anytime I would, really sad, just thinking about the future, knowing that his childhood will come to an end, and eventually will die. Just really sad. I just became really, really sad, but then also hopeful that maybe if I love him this much, maybe that means that there's a meaning to that love, and maybe there is something bigger than that. So I like to look back and think that, the love that I have for my son helped me to love the son.
Wow. So, and you mentioned that you had become Christian first, and then like become Protestant, and then became Catholic later. So how did that happen from when your son was born, and then, okay, like, I want to become Christian, I want to give my life to Christ?
Oh, that was a very scary thing. So my whole family is on I mentioned this, I think, before we started recording. My dad is of a skeptical nature. He was raised Catholic, but not, even still, like, he'll be like, "Oh, today is St. Blaise's feast day." I'm like, where did that come from? But, it's just like, and Graham, he's in his 70s now, and he still knows all this stuff back in grade school. But really ingrained in him. But he also, all his side of the family, a lot of them are journalists. And so just that investigative mindset is really big for all of them. And so, Pat knew. I remember we went for a walk one day, and he's like, "Do you know about Jesus Christ?" And I was like, yeah. I know. He's not for me. I know enough about him. He's like, he looked at me, he's like, "I don't think you know." Okay. And he let that go a little bit, because he probably knew that if he told me about Jesus in that moment, I just would have, no. And, I'll just get back. So he knew that my hangups were really from a misunderstanding of who Jesus actually was. Like, is he just a guru? Was he a myth and a legend? So the book that really helped me really understand that Jesus is a real historical person, and you can be a reasonable person in believing in him, was The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel.
Yeah.
This is an investigative journalist, a former, an atheist. His wife converts, and then he goes to investigate using his journalism skills. He talks to a bunch of experts and tries to deconvert his wife, or convert her back to atheism. And so I like immediately, an investigative journalist, okay, that's a safe thing. And an atheist, okay, I understand that. And then I went to school for anthropology, and so there was archaeology in there, and history, which I love. And so Pat knew that would be a good book for me. And so I read that book, and I got to say, the big thing that I struggled with, again, and I mentioned it earlier, was that Jesus Christ is your personal Lord and Savior, and that he died for your sins. And I really had a problem with the whole idea of sin in general. I think that's pretty common for our younger generation. But once it's probably like not even halfway through the book, I get to a part in it where he discusses about the red in humanity's collective ledger, basically, and that there is sin, and it needs to be reconciled. We can't just let that red just keep piling up. Mm-hmm. And the way it was explained in the book, I finally understood what people have been asking me throughout my childhood that I thought they were crazy to ask. And I closed the book. Actually, I could have been reading on a Kindle. So I turned off my phone for a second, and I just sat there in the dark. I remember this. It was my Kindle, because I was nursing my second child. Maybe my third kid. It's all It all blends together after a while. But I was nursing my baby, and it was nighttime, and I just turned off the phone and I sat in the dark and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a Christian. I get it. I believe this. And I just sat there. I was like, whoa, okay, what do I do now? And I had no idea.
Wow.
But the one thing that kept coming to mind and had been niggling at me for a long time, months, is I saw this advertisement on Facebook for something. I don't even know what it was for now. But it's the tagline for it was, what if for 30 days you just believed? And I don't know what they were selling. I never went back and tried. I couldn't find it when I went back to look for it. But I was like, well, what if for 30 days I believed? And it kept, over the course of a couple of months, it kept just sticking out in my mind. And so when I sat there uncertain and, sitting there in the dark, uncertain what that meant to be a Christian or what that meant for me, I was like, well, what if for 30 days I just believed? What if I read the Bible and prayed and learned about Christian faith and maybe wore a cross necklace? And if somebody asked me if I was a Christian, what if I said yes? What would happen? And I was like, well, the worst case is, 30 days down the line, I realize that this is all bunk and I still don't believe, and it'll be a little embarrassing. I'll have to eat crow a little bit, but I can at least say, go back to my atheism and say, well, look, I gave it an honest try and I still think it was a bunch of baloney. Okay. Or, something else might happen. I don't know what. So I decided to, for 30 days, just see how it goes. And it went well.
Wow. What did you find out? Like, yes, what else, what must I do now to be a Christian? Or like, what's the next step? Or was Catholic, or was Pat Catholic at the time? Like, did he already?
I think he probably was, but he didn't let me know, because I finally agreed to go to church with him. He'd been trying to get me for a couple of years, because we had, he's younger than I am. And, but even still, like, neither of us had friends who had kids that were kind of in a similar life stage as us.
Yeah.
His friends were younger, so they were probably, none of them were getting married or having kids yet. And then I just, I was friends with work people, and they did have kids, but they lived far away and were busy. So we were without other people that were like us, that with, younger parents with kids. And so he had been trying to get me to go to church in order to find some kind of meaningful social circle.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's not good enough. You can't just go, or let's go to church for a pancake breakfast. I was like, you can't go to a church for just pancakes. You got to kind of believe in this stuff. He was trying to appeal to my stomach. But I said, okay, we will go. And he's like, okay, let's try out different ones. I was big, and I kind of like the idea of the Quakers, because we lived in Pennsylvania. We're surrounded by Quakers, and one of my uncles grew up as a Quaker. And I like that whole idea of anybody could stand up during the assembly and preach whatever came to them. And that felt like egalitarian and more spiritual, and there's no middleman there. You just sit in silence until somebody wants to speak and feels called to speak. And I was like, okay, that seems safe to me. We actually never made it to a meeting house because I wound up, and I was like, well, you know what? I'll try Lutheran, because I knew a couple of Lutherans growing up. So that seems safe. And because even if this stuff is true, I wanted to make sure that we respected it. So it's just a contradiction, because I really thought that Catholics were all pomp and circumstance, all show. Ooh, look at me with the robes and the incense and the candles, the smells and bells stuff. I thought that was just unnecessary. But at the same time, I went to a couple of evangelical services where they had mood lighting and big screen TVs with stock photos playing the whole time. And they had a t-shirt cannon shooting t-shirts out into the congregation. And I was like, that's not it either. But I don't know if Catholic is it either. So Pat's, he's like, okay, you pick. Because at this point, I think he's pretty sure he's Catholic, but he didn't want to tell me. So you pick. He's like, but I would like you to try going to a Catholic church. And I was like, I'll go, but there's no way in hell I'm ever going to become a Catholic. And I'm sure the Holy Spirit had a very good chuckle over that one.
Wow.
Because it was probably within 3 months that I was like full-fledged writing an email to the Lutheran pastor saying, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be confirmed Lutheran. I've got to go become Catholic.
What was it? Like, was there a couple different things that happened in that 3-month time or whatever, a month, to where it's like, okay, I got to become Catholic? Like, what did you read something? Yeah. Like, what was it?
It was probably the so again, like I was still struggling with that no personality thing. So
Mhm.
Pat, like once we got to Lutheran, I was like, that's good enough. We're good here. We don't have to expand anywhere else. We're going to stay in our little bubble here. This is the acceptable bubble. And then it was around Christmas Eve, Pat felt called to go to Christmas Eve Mass.
Mm.
And it was sleeting out, and growing up, Christmas Eve is like, that is the special night for our family where we would have our big Christmas dinner and we would eat desserts and watch Christmas movies like that. There's traditions there that you don't mess with. And when Pat wanted to leave, and like halfway through me making dinner, I was like, what? So it's again like, kind of angry at the whole Catholic thing. But he had I think he was watching the Catholicism series with Bishop Robert Barron.
Mm-hmm.
And that was on, and the cinematography was so beautiful and the music is great. And I was just passing through the living room and sat down and started watching it. And when I was a kid, if I got dragged to Catholic Mass with my friend, I would always make fun. Anything, the sitting, the standing, the kneeling, the bells ringing out at the transubstantiation, I would make fun of the bells, like the bells, And it so happened that he had the episode on where he talked about the Eucharist and the transubstantiation. And I happened to sit down and watch that, and he explained it so well. And I don't want to say the stars aligned because that's very incorrect. But everything just worked. Where my heart was at that moment, I finally understood why Catholics do that thing. Why it is so important. And at this point, Pat was going to daily Mass, and he kept asking me to go. But I had to go to a full-time office job, and Mass started at 9:00. So I had to figure out a way to be late to work and figure out childcare for our kids. And again, all that worked out. And it just so happened the day that we went, the first day that I went with Pat, I had seen an awful, awful news story that morning or the night before. And it was really weighing heavily on my mind. And the priest who gave the homily for that Mass directly spoke to the problem of evil and suffering. And I felt at peace with what he had said. That all made sense to me. And then we had just come off watching the episode about the Eucharist and the Mass. And so by the time that it was, the bell, we were on our knees and the bells were ringing for the transubstantiation, I probably would have fallen to my knees anyway. I finally understood, and I was just so overwhelmed and in love with it. That I knew that there was something there that I didn't want to leave. Wow.
So was it after the Christmas Eve and like being mad at Pat for leaving? That's when you checked out? Yeah,
that would have been probably early February.
Okay. And then you watched the Catholicism series after that. And then,
all through that time, we slowly would watch an episode here or there, and then I was dissatisfied with the Lutheran. The leadership at the Lutheran church that we were going to. There were a couple things that happened that made me think, I don't know if I like this. So it all just kind of lined up where I started, I realized that we couldn't stop where we were.
Yeah.
That it was okay to keep going.
And then once you were like, okay, I want to become Catholic, did you join RCIA, do the 9-month thing? And then
I didn't need to. Because it worked out very nicely there. We went and met with the sister who was in charge of the adult faith formation at our old parish, and she's a wonderful woman. She's actually the godmother for 2 or 3 of our kids. We got 3 of them dunked at the same time.
Wow.
We thought that we went to the baptism class. Everybody thought we had triplets. I'm like, no, we're just a little late to the party. But she was so wonderful. Sister Eileen, I love her so much, and she just listened to our story, and at this point, Pat and I were both reading a lot of books and trying to educate ourselves a lot, and already reading the Catechism. And so she felt that Pat was far enough along because he'd already been baptized and he could get confirmed at Pentecost that year. And she felt in a couple of months' time I would have been ready to be baptized. So I entered RCIA probably before Valentine's Day, at the start of Lent, I guess, a couple of years ago. Okay. I got baptized at Vigil.
Wow.
It was wonderful. But then I didn't get confirmed until last year. So, and that I thought we moved, just up and picked up and left Philadelphia and moved to Wisconsin. And I didn't think I was going to be able to get confirmed. I thought it was going to have to be another year, but thankfully they were able to squeeze me in, and I found out that I was going to get confirmed probably about 3 to 5 days before Pentecost last year.
Wow. So why didn't they just baptize, confirm, give you the Eucharist like all at once that year? Just like
yeah, there was I had gotten married once. I eloped when I was barely 20, and I had to get all of that. I had to get that annulled.
Okay.
And the paperwork had to go through that, and then Pat and I had to get baptized. But before I could and we had to get our marriage blessed. But before we could do that, I had to get baptized. And so the way the father sat down with me, and he's like, "This is the best I can think to do." He like mapped it all out, and paperwork that needed to come in, and I had to get in touch with my ex's family to try to prove that he wasn't actually Christian, and that this was not a sacramental marriage by any means, and it certainly wasn't.
Right. Was that pretty tough? Like, were you to go through that and just be like, "Gosh, this seems like just a bunch of bureaucracy," or like, were you like, "No, I understand what the church teaches, and so I'm fine with it," or like?
Yeah, I have always balked under the idea of authority, and this is why I think the Catholic faith is true, and why I believe in it wholeheartedly, is I have always struggled with authority, somebody telling me what to do. And I have 100% fall in line with everything that the Catholic Church teaches. So if the Catholic Church tells me that I need to get this paperwork in and make sure that this is not a sacramental marriage and we need to get this annulled, that is what they believe. I believe everything else. I'm going to believe this. And I will go along with it. I trust it. And God's will be done. So
wow.
It's a complete, it's very, I feel so bad for all those people that I was mean to in the past. I wish, look, I'm nice. I'm so sorry. And I've a complete 180 on pretty much everything.
Wow.
So I'm totally fine. Like the Catholic Church teaches it. I am all in. Reconciliation, the who can and cannot receive the Eucharist, whatever it is. Yeah. I trust the Church herself is not misguided in any of it.
Wow. So in our last few moments together on this episode, how has it been since you got confirmed, received the Eucharist for the first time, and like living the sacramental life? What has that been like? And then what would you just say if you have any last words to the listeners out there that may be into the New Age, or maybe into atheism, or maybe Protestant, anyone who's not Catholic? Like, what would you say to them as well?
Everything's changed for the better. I think that Pat and I had our marriage blessed on Easter Monday, right? 2 days after I got baptized, and just making our marriage into a sacrament changed the whole family life. And me just being Catholic, I'm much more forgiving. I've learned to hold my tongue a lot more, which is good because I can be a little sharp. I've learned to be more patient. Patience is a huge thing that I've struggled with. And over time, I would just be so frustrated with myself that I would snap at somebody or get impatient. Why can't I be better? And, the more I've just prayed, just prayer life, and finally seeing some improvements in my personality, these traits that haunted me, that I could not seem to fix on my own. Realizing that I'm not alone, and there's a whole host of saints and angels who are rooting me on, and that it's just all becomes so. I mean, the life is harder, right? I can't just turn my back on somebody because they're struggling. I can't be like, well, that's your problem. I'm on my journey. I'm good. You take care of your own. I can't do that anymore. So it's been difficult in that way, but it's a good kind of suffering. The suffering that I feel that I have to reach out and stick around to help somebody, or, work through a difficulty in a relationship, or, a friendship, or whatever it is, it's all worthwhile. And so, the meaning that I was looking for in my own life, that fear of mediocrity, completely disappeared. I am a daughter of God, and it's a beautiful life. It's a hard life, but it was hard anyway. Life's going to be hard whether or not you have Jesus. Yeah. You're going to suffer whether or not you have Jesus. And with Jesus, though, like you said, the burden is light and the yoke is easy. It's absolutely true.
Wow. Well, Christine, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, sharing your story. And I just encourage everyone out there to check out The Catholic Mama. And
Yes, please do. Lots on there. And I've talked about this conversion story and a lot of other stuff. I think I'm over 100 full-length episodes now, so lots to dive into.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. This has been fun.
WCATradio.com has a show for every interest: apologetics, theology, moral living, and more. Know Your Faith. Please look up my show, Know Your Faith, by logging into WCATradio.com. Then click on Fridays, and that's where you'll find me. Know Your Faith, a show hosted by me, Robert Madrigal, and we'll see you at the show.
For listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.